The wind howled across the empty plains of Montana, carrying with it the bitter cold of late November. Samuel Morrison sat alone in his weathered farmhouse, the only sounds being the crackling of logs in the fireplace and the distant lowing of cattle seeking shelter. At 52, Sam had grown accustomed to the solitude that had become his constant companion since losing his wife Margaret 3 years ago to cancer. The ranch stretched for miles in every direction, a sprawling piece of land that had been in his family for 4 generations. Sam had inherited it from his father, who had inherited it from his grandfather, each man adding their own sweat and dreams to the soil. Now, with no children of his own and Margaret gone, Sam often wondered what would become of the Morrison Ranch when he was no longer able to tend to it. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 11 times, its deep tone echoing through the sparsely furnished living room. Sam rubbed his tired eyes and considered heading to bed. Tomorrow would bring another day of mending fences, checking on the herd, and fighting against the loneliness that seemed to grow stronger with each passing season. He had just reached for the lamp switch when 3 sharp knocks echoed through the house. Sam froze. In all his years living on the remote ranch, unexpected visitors were rare, especially at this hour. The nearest neighbor lived 15 miles away, and the small town of Cedar Falls was even farther. The knocking came again, more urgent this time. Sam grabbed the shotgun from above the fireplace mantel, not out of fear, but from years of caution living in the isolated countryside. He approached the heavy wooden door slowly, his bare feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice gruff from years of talking mainly to himself and his animals. "Please, sir," came a small, trembling voice from the other side. "I need help. My mother, she's having the baby." Sam's eyebrows shot up in surprise. The voice belonged to a young girl, and she spoke with an accent he couldn't quite place. He quickly unlatched the multiple locks and pulled open the door, the frigid night air rushing past him. Standing on his porch was a girl who couldn't have been more than 12 years old. She was Asian, with long black hair partially covered by a thin, inadequate jacket. Her small frame was shivering violently in the cold, and her dark eyes were wide with desperation and fear. Behind her, parked in his driveway, was an old pickup truck with steam rising from under its hood. "Please," the girl said again, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely form the words. The truck had stopped working. "The engine is making bad sounds. My mother, she's in the back. The baby is coming now." Without hesitation, Sam set the shotgun aside and grabbed his coat from the hook by the door. "Show me," he said simply, his years of ranch life having taught him that in emergencies, action came before questions. The girl led him to the truck, her small feet crunching through the light dusting of snow that had begun to fall. As they approached, Sam could hear sounds coming from the truck bed, pain moans, and rapid breathing. He looked over the tailgate and saw a woman lying on several blankets, her face contorted in pain, her hands gripping her swollen belly. The woman appeared to be in her 30s, with the same delicate Asian features as the girl. Her clothes were simple and worn, and Sam could see that she was indeed in the advanced stages of labor. Her eyes met his briefly, filled with pain and embarrassment at being discovered in such a vulnerable state by a stranger. "How long has she been like this?" Sam asked the girl, his mind already racing through what needed to be done. "Since this afternoon," the girl replied, wrapping her thin arms around herself. "We were driving to the hospital in Billings, but the truck started making noises and then it just stopped. We've been here for 2 hours. I saw your lights and thought maybe you could help us." Sam looked under the hood of the truck and immediately saw the problem. The radiator had cracked and the engine had overheated badly. This vehicle wasn't going anywhere tonight, possibly not for several days. Another cry of pain came from the woman in the truck bed, more intense this time. Sam realized that waiting for help was an option. The nearest hospital was over an hour away, even in good conditions, and with the weather turning worse and no working vehicle, they were facing a crisis. "What's your name?" Sam asked the girl. "Li Mei," she replied. "And my mother is Li Wei." "I'm Sam Morrison," he said, extending his hand to the frightened child. "Li Mei, I need you to listen to me carefully. Your mother's going to have this baby tonight, and we need to get her inside where it's warm and safe. Can you help me move her?" Li Mei nodded eagerly, relief flooding her features at finding someone willing to help. Sam carefully climbed into the truck bed and assessed Li Wei's condition. Her contractions were coming close together, and he could see that delivery was imminent. "Ma'am," Sam said gently in English, not sure she understood. Li Wei's eyes focused on him with difficulty through her pain. Li Mei quickly translated in what Sam now recognized as Mandarin. Li Wei spoke rapidly to her daughter, and Li Mei turned back to Sam. She says, "Thank you for helping us. She's scared because this is not like when I was born. The pain is much worse." Sam had helped deliver countless calves and foals over the years, but human birth was different territory entirely. Still, the principles were similar, and his main concern was getting the woman somewhere warm and clean. "We need to move her now," Sam decided. "Li Mei, can you grab those blankets? I'm going to carry your mother inside." Despite Li Wei's protests and attempts to walk on her own, Sam carefully lifted her in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, probably no more than 100 pounds, even in her pregnant state. Li Mei gathered the blankets and followed as Sam carried her mother toward the house. Once inside, Sam headed straight for the guest bedroom on the first floor, a room that had been empty since Margaret's sister had visited 2 years ago. He gently placed Li Wei on the bed and immediately began gathering supplies: clean towels, scissors, string, and a large pot of water to boil. Li Mei stayed by her mother's side, holding her hand and speaking to her in soothing tones. Despite her young age, the girl displayed a maturity beyond her years, clearly having taken on responsibilities far greater than any child should bear. "Li Mei," Sam said as he returned with towels and began stoking the fire in the bedroom's small fireplace. "I need to ask you some questions. Is this your mother's second baby?" "Yes," Li Mei replied. "I was born 12 years ago in China. We came to America 2 years ago after my father died in an accident at the factory where he worked." Sam felt a pang of sympathy. Here was another family that had faced loss and hardship, trying to build a new life in a foreign country. He thought of his own struggles with loneliness and realized how much greater these two must be facing. Li Wei cried out again, and this time Sam could see that the baby was beginning to crown. There was no time for further conversation or preparation. This baby was coming whether they were ready or not. "Li Mei, I need you to translate for me," Sam said, moving to the foot of the bed. "Tell your mother that everything is going to be all right, but she needs to listen to me and do exactly what I say." Li Mei spoke rapidly to her mother, who nodded through her pain. Sam had delivered enough animals to know the basics, but human babies were smaller and more delicate. He washed his hands thoroughly and tried to remember everything he'd learned from the ranch veterinarian over the years. "Tell her to push when the pain comes, but gently," Sam instructed. "And when I tell her to stop pushing, she needs to pant like a dog. Can you show her?" Li Mei demonstrated the breathing technique, and Li Wei nodded her understanding. Over the next 40 minutes, Sam guided the laboring woman through the delivery process, his rough rancher's hands surprisingly gentle as he helped bring new life into the world. At exactly 12:37 in the morning, a tiny baby girl entered the world with a strong, healthy cry that filled the quiet ranch house. Sam carefully cleaned the infant and wrapped her in one of Margaret's old quilts, then placed the baby in Li Wei's arms. The exhausted mother looked down at her newborn daughter with tears streaming down her face. She spoke softly to Li Mei, who translated with wonder in her voice. She says, "Thank you for giving her daughter life. She wants to know if you think the baby looks healthy." Sam looked at the tiny infant, who had stopped crying and was now looking around with alert, dark eyes. "She's perfect," he said honestly. "Small but perfect. Strong lungs, good color, all her fingers and toes. Your mother did a beautiful job." As Li Mei translated, Li Wei began to sob with relief. Sam felt his own eyes growing moist as he watched this young mother hold her newborn child. The ranch house, which had been silent and empty for so long, was now filled with the sounds of new life and hope. "What will she name the baby?" Sam asked. Sam Morrison had spent 3 years believing that his capacity for caring had died with Margaret. But as he looked at baby Hope sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, he began to understand that sometimes life has a way of bringing exactly what we need, exactly when we need it most. The night was far from over, and there were practical matters to attend to: getting medical care for Li Wei and the baby, figuring out what to do about their broken-down truck, and learning more about how this small family had ended up at his door. But for now, in this quiet moment filled with wonder and gratitude, Sam Morrison lit every lamp in his house, chasing away the darkness and welcoming the unexpected light that had come knocking at his door at midnight. The first rays of dawn crept through the guest bedroom window, casting a golden glow across the peaceful scene within. Sam Morrison had spent the night in the old rocking chair beside the bed, catching fragments of sleep while keeping watch over Li Wei and baby Hope. Every few hours, the infant would wake with soft mewing sounds, and Li Wei would nurse her while Li Mei dozed in the second chair Sam had brought in from the kitchen. As the morning light grew stronger, Sam quietly left the room to start coffee and prepare breakfast. "Are you hungry?" "I was about to make eggs and toast." Li Mei's eyes lit up, and Sam realized the family probably hadn't eaten in quite some time. As he began preparing breakfast, Li Mei perched on one of the kitchen stools and watched him with curious eyes. "Mr. Morrison," she said hesitantly, "why do you live here all alone? This house is very big for one person." The directness of children always caught Sam off guard. Adults would dance around such questions, but Li Mei simply wanted to understand her surroundings. "I used to live here with my wife, Margaret," Sam explained, cracking eggs into a bowl. "She died 3 years ago from cancer. We never had children, so now it's just me and the cattle." Li Mei considered this thoughtfully. "My father died in an accident at a factory in California. A big machine fell on him. Mama cried for many weeks, and then she said we must be strong and find a new place to start over." Sam paused in his cooking, struck by the simple way Li Mei described such a profound tragedy. "I'm sorry about your father. That must have been very hard for you and your mother." "Yes, but Mama says that sad things happen to everyone, and we must choose to keep living anyway. She says Papa would want us to be happy." Li Mei swung her legs from the stool. "Were you very sad when your wife died?" The question hit Sam unexpectedly deep. He had become so accustomed to avoiding conversations about Margaret that he had almost forgotten how to talk about his grief honestly. "Yes," he said simply. "I was very sad. I still am sometimes. But you helped us anyway, even though you were sad," Li Mei observed. "Mama always says that helping others helps heal our own hearts. Do you think that's true?" Before Sam could answer, a soft cry came from the bedroom. Li Mei immediately slipped down from the stool. "Hope is hungry again. I should help Mama." Sam watched the young girl hurry toward the bedroom and found himself thinking about her words. In the years since Margaret's death, he had isolated himself from the community, declining invitations to church suppers and holiday gatherings. He had convinced himself that solitude was what he needed, but last night had awakened something in him that he thought had died with his wife. 20 minutes later, Sam knocked gently on the bedroom door before entering with a breakfast tray. Li Wei was sitting up in bed, looking pale but alert, with baby Hope nursing contentedly. Li Mei sat cross-legged on the bed beside them, gently stroking the baby's tiny hand. "How are you feeling?" Sam asked Li Wei, though he knew she might not understand English. Li Mei translated, and Li Wei responded with what sounded like gratitude, mixed with concern. "She says she feels much better, but she is worried about imposing on your kindness," Li Mei explained. "She wants to know about our truck and when we should leave." Sam set the tray on the bedside table and pulled the chair closer to the bed. "Tell your mother that she and the baby need to see a doctor today. I called Dr. Patterson in town this morning, and he's coming out here around noon to check on both of them." Li Mei's eyes widened in surprise. "You called the doctor to come here? But that must cost much money." "Don't worry about the money," Sam said firmly. "Your mother just had a baby in my house, which makes you all my responsibility until I know you're safe and healthy." As Li Mei translated, Li Wei's eyes filled with tears. She spoke rapidly to her daughter, gesturing toward Sam with obvious emotion. "She says you're like a guardian angel," Li Mei translated. "In China, there are stories about strangers who appear in times of great need to help people. She thinks maybe you are one of these special people." Sam felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm just a rancher who happened to be home when you needed help. Anyone would have done the same thing." Li Wei spoke again, and Li Mei smiled as she translated. "She says that cannot be true because many cars passed us on the road yesterday, and no one stopped. Only you opened your door when we knocked." After breakfast, Sam went outside to examine the broken truck more carefully. The engine damage was extensive. Not only was the radiator cracked, but the head gasket had blown and the pistons had likely seized. It would need major repairs that would cost more than the old truck was worth. He found Li Mei sitting on the porch steps, still in the clothes she had worn the night before. She was looking out across the vast expanse of ranch land with an expression of worry beyond her years. "It's beautiful here," she said when Sam joined her on the steps. "So much space and quiet. In the city where we lived, there were always sirens and shouting and cars honking." "Do you miss the city?" Sam asked. Lee May thought about this carefully. "I miss my friend Rosa, who lived in the apartment next to us. And I miss the library where I could read books in English to practice. But I don't miss being scared all the time." "Scared of what?" "Of not having enough money for rent. Of Mama working 2 jobs and being so tired she would fall asleep at the dinner table. Of the men who would come to our building at night and make loud noises and break things." Lee May pulled her knees up to her chest. "Mama thought if we went to a smaller place, maybe life would be easier." Sam felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when he found injured animals on his property. "Where were you going when your truck broke down?" "Mama heard there might be work at a chicken processing plant in Billings. She thought maybe we could rent a small apartment there, and I could go to a real school instead of just studying from old books." Lee May's voice grew smaller. "But now the truck is broken, and we used most of our money for gas to get here." The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Patterson's arrival. Sam had known Doc Patterson for over 20 years. He had been the one to deliver the devastating news about Margaret's cancer, and he had also been the one to comfort Sam through the worst of his grief. Dr. Patterson was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and gentle hands that had brought countless babies into the world. He carried his medical bag with the same confidence Sam carried his tools. These were instruments he had used for decades and trusted completely. "Sam Morrison," Doc Patterson said with genuine warmth, "I have to admit, when you called this morning, I thought maybe the isolation was finally getting to you." "A Chinese woman having a baby in your guest room?" It sounded like the beginning of a tall tale. Sam chuckled as he led the doctor inside. "I thought I might be dreaming myself. But they're real enough, and that baby has a good set of lungs on her." The examination took nearly an hour. Dr. Patterson checked both Lee Wei and Baby Hope thoroughly, asking questions through Lee May's translation. Sam waited anxiously in the living room, surprised by how invested he had become in this family's well-being in such a short time. When the doctor finally emerged from the bedroom, he was smiling. "Mother and baby are both in excellent health," he announced. "That was good work you did last night, Sam. Everything went perfectly." Relief flooded through Sam. "So they're okay to travel?" Dr. Patterson's expression grew more serious. "Well, that's where things get complicated. Normally, I'd recommend that new mothers avoid long car trips for at least a week or 2, especially after a delivery like that. And I understand their vehicle isn't operational." Sam nodded. "The truck is in bad shape. It would need major engine work. Then, I'd strongly advise them to stay put for at least another week. The baby needs time to adjust, and the mother needs time to recover her strength." Dr. Patterson studied Sam's face carefully. "I assume they don't have family in the area who could take them in?" "No, they're on their own." Sam looked toward the bedroom door. "Doc, can I ask you something? Hypothetically speaking, what would happen to a family like this if they had no money and no place to go?" Dr. Patterson sighed heavily. "Hypothetically, social services would get involved. The mother and baby would probably end up in a shelter in Billings, assuming there was space. The 12-year-old might end up in foster care temporarily if they couldn't prove stable housing." He paused. "It's not a pretty picture, Sam." The 2 men stood in silence for a moment, both understanding the implications. Finally, Sam made a decision that surprised even himself. "What if they stayed here for a few weeks? Just until they get back on their feet and figure out their next step?" Dr. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Sam, that's a generous offer, but are you sure you've thought this through? You've been living alone for 3 years. Taking in a family, even temporarily, is a big adjustment." Sam looked around his quiet house, imagining it empty again after Lee May, and Baby Hope continued on their journey. The thought of returning to his solitary meals and silent evenings felt suddenly unbearable. "I've got plenty of room," Sam said slowly. "And honestly, Doc, having people in the house again, it feels right somehow. Margaret always said this place was too big for just 2 people. Maybe she was trying to tell me something." Dr. Patterson smiled and clapped Sam on the shoulder. "Margaret was a wise woman. If you're serious about this offer, I think it could be exactly what this family needs. But you should discuss it with them first. They're proud people, Sam. They'll want to contribute somehow." After Dr. Patterson left, Sam sat in his kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to find the courage to make his offer. Through the window, He could see Li Mei exploring the ranch yard, her small figure dwarfed by the vast landscape around her. She moved with the careful curiosity of a child who had learned not to take safety for granted. This family had lost so much: a husband and father, their home, their sense of security. But they had also shown tremendous courage and strength. Li Mei's bravery in seeking help for her mother, Li Wei's grace under impossible circumstances, and the pure hope represented by baby Hope's arrival had already changed something fundamental in Sam's world. As the afternoon sun slanted through his kitchen window, Sam Morrison realized that for the first time since Margaret's death, he had a chance to be part of something larger than his own grief. The question was whether he had the courage to reach out and grab it. The conversation that would change all their lives began simply enough. Sam found Li Mei in the barn that afternoon, sitting cross-legged in the hay while watching the horses with fascination. She had been quiet since Dr. Patterson's visit, and Sam suspected she was worried about what would happen next. "Have you ever been around horses before?" Sam asked, settling down on a hay bale beside her. Li Mei shook her head. "In the city, I only saw police horses sometimes. These are much bigger than I thought they would be." She pointed to Thunder, Sam's gentle bay gelding. "That one keeps looking at me. Is he friendly?" "Thunder is about the gentlest horse you'll ever meet," Sam assured her. "Would you like to pet him?" Li Mei's eyes lit up with excitement and nervousness. Sam led her to Thunder's stall and showed her how to hold her hand flat while offering the horse a piece of apple. Thunder's soft lips tickled Li Mei's palm as he took the treat, and she giggled with delight. "He's so soft," she marveled, stroking Thunder's neck with careful reverence. "And warm. I didn't know horses were so warm." Sam watched Li Mei interact with the horse and felt something shift inside his chest. The girl's wonder at these simple ranch experiences reminded him of why he had fallen in love with this life in the first place. He had forgotten what it was like to see his world through fresh eyes. "Li Mei," Sam said carefully, "I need to talk to you about something important. Can you translate for your mother?" The girl's expression immediately became serious, and Sam realized she was expecting bad news. In her young life, important conversations usually meant something was going wrong. They returned to the house, where Li Wei was resting with baby Hope. The newborn was awake and alert, her dark eyes seeming to take in everything around her with remarkable focus for someone less than 24 hours old. Sam pulled his chair close to the bed and tried to find the right words. He had rehearsed this conversation in his head a dozen times, but now that the moment had arrived, his throat felt tight with emotion. "Li Mei, I want you to translate something for your mother, and then I want both of you to think about it carefully before you answer," Sam began. "Dr. Patterson says your mother and the baby should rest for at least a week before traveling anywhere. Your truck needs expensive repairs that might take weeks to arrange and pay for." Li Mei translated rapidly, and Sam saw concern flash across Li Wei's face. She spoke quickly to her daughter, gesturing toward the window. "Mama says she understands we have been a burden to you," Li Mei said quietly. "She wants to know if there's a shelter in the town where we can go tomorrow. She does not want to impose on your kindness any longer." Sam felt his heart clench at the formal politeness of the response. These people had been through so much, and their first instinct was still to worry about bothering him. "Tell your mother that you haven't been a burden," Sam said firmly. "You've been a blessing. This house has been empty and quiet for 3 years. Having you here has reminded me what it feels like to be alive again." As Li Mei translated, Li Wei's eyes widened in surprise. She spoke again, her voice soft and uncertain. "She wants to know what you mean," Li Mei said. Sam took a deep breath. "I want to offer you and your family a place to stay, not just for a week, but for as long as you need to get back on your feet. You could have this room permanently, and Li Mei could have the room upstairs that's been empty for a while." Li Mei's mouth fell open in shock, and she forgot to translate for several seconds. When she finally found her voice, she spoke rapidly to her mother in Mandarin. Li Wei's response was immediate and emotional. She shook her head repeatedly while speaking in a tone that clearly indicated protest. "She says we cannot accept such charity," Li Mei translated, her own voice thick with emotion. "We have nothing to give you in return. She says it would not be honorable to take so much when we can offer so little." Sam had expected this response. Pride was something he understood well. It had kept him isolated on his ranch rather than accepting help from concerned neighbors after Margaret's death. "Tell your mother that I'm not offering charity," Sam said carefully. I'm offering a partnership. This ranch is too much work for one person. I need help with cooking, cleaning, caring for the animals. Li Mei could help with the horses and learn ranch skills. Your mother could help manage the household and maybe learn some ranch work too when she's recovered. Li Mei translated, and this time Li Wei listened with careful attention. When Sam finished, she asked several questions through Li Mei. She wanted to know if you mean we would work for you in exchange for staying here, Li Mei said. She wanted to know if there would be wages or just room and food. Both, Sam said without hesitation. Room, food, and wages. Nothing fancy, but enough to help you save money and plan for your future. And Li Mei could attend the school in Cedar Falls. It's a good school, small, but with caring teachers. At the mention of school, Li Mei's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she translated for her mother. Li Wei listened with growing amazement, asking clarifying questions that Li Mei translated through her tears. She wants to know why you would do this for strangers, Li Mei said. She cannot understand why you would be so generous to people you do not know. Sam looked down at baby Hope, who had fallen asleep in her mother's arms. The infant's tiny face was perfectly peaceful, her small hand curled against her mother's chest. When he looked up, both Li Mei and Li Wei were watching him intently. My wife Margaret and I tried for years to have children, Sam said quietly. We went to doctors, tried treatments, prayed every night, but it never happened. Margaret used to say that maybe God had different plans for us, that maybe we were meant to help children in a different way. Li Mei translated, and Li Wei's expression softened with understanding. When Margaret got sick, Sam continued, she made me promise that I wouldn't give up on life after she was gone. She said the ranch was too beautiful and too full of love to become a place of sadness. But after she died, I couldn't figure out how to keep that promise. I just knew how to be sad and alone. Sam paused, struggling with emotions he had kept buried for 3 years. Last night, when I opened that door and saw Li Mei standing there in the cold, asking for help, it was like Margaret was giving me a chance to keep my promise. You didn't just ask me for help with a medical emergency. You brought life back into this house. Li Mei had stopped translating and was staring at Sam with wide, tear-filled eyes. You really mean it? We could stay here and be like a family. The word family hung in the air between them, loaded with hope and possibility and fear. Sam felt his own eyes growing moist as he nodded. If you want to, yes. We could be like a family. Li Mei turned to her mother and spoke rapidly in Mandarin, her words tumbling over each other in her excitement. Li Wei listened carefully, asked a few more questions, then was quiet for a long moment as she considered everything she had heard. Finally, Li Wei spoke directly to Sam in careful, heavily accented English. Thank you, she said slowly. We stay. We work hard. We be good family for you. The simple words hit Sam with surprising force. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear them until Li Wei spoke them. For the first time in 3 years, Sam Morrison felt like he had a purpose beyond simply existing from one day to the next. There are some practical things we need to figure out, Sam said, his rancher's mind already moving to logistics. Li Mei, you'll need to be enrolled in school. Your mother will need to get a social security number and work permit so everything is legal. The baby will need regular checkups with Dr. Patterson. Li Mei translated, and Li Wei nodded eagerly. She spoke at length to her daughter, gesturing animatedly. Mama says she worked in a textile factory in China before I was born, Li Mei translated. She knows how to sew and cook and clean. She says she can learn ranch work if you teach her. She promises we will earn our place here. And I can learn to take care of horses, Li Mei added with excitement. Maybe I can learn to ride them too. Sam couldn't help but smile at the girl's enthusiasm. We'll start with learning to care for them properly. Riding comes later, after you understand how to be safe around horses. Baby Hope chose that moment to wake up and announce her hunger with a lusty cry that made all 3 adults laugh. As Li Wei prepared to nurse the baby, Sam realized that he needed to make some immediate changes to accommodate his new family. Li Mei, would you like to see your room? Sam asked. I think you might like it. There's a window that looks out over the pasture where the horses graze. Li Mei practically bounced with excitement as she followed Sam upstairs to what had been Margaret's sewing room. It was a bright, airy space with built-in shelves and a window seat overlooking the ranch's most beautiful vista. This would be mine? Li Mei asked in wonder, walking slowly around the room and touching everything with reverent care. All yours, Sam confirmed. We'll need to get you some furniture, a bed, a dresser, a desk for homework. Maybe some books for those shelves. Li Mei stood at the window, looking out over the rolling hills where cattle dotted the landscape like dark spots against the green grass. Mr. Morrison, she said softly, why did you decide to trust us? We are strangers who came to your door in the night. How did you know we were good people? It was a surprisingly sophisticated question from a 12-year-old, and Sam considered his answer carefully. I didn't know, he admitted. But sometimes in life, you have to make decisions based on what feels right instead of what you know for certain. When I saw you standing on my porch, shivering and scared but brave enough to ask for help for your mother, I knew you had good hearts. Everything since then has proven me right. Li Mei turned from the window with tears in her eyes. In China, we have a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I think maybe it works the other way too. When the teacher is ready, the student will appear. Sam looked at this wise young girl and felt a stirring of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. Li Mei was right. He had been ready to learn how to live again, and she had appeared at his door to teach him. But he was also ready to be a teacher himself, to pass on everything he knew about ranching and life on the land to someone who would appreciate and value it. As they headed back downstairs to rejoin Li Wei and baby Hope, Sam found himself making mental lists of everything that needed to be done. School enrollment for Li Mei, legal paperwork for Li Wei, supplies for the baby, furniture for bedrooms, groceries for a family instead of a single man living on coffee and sandwiches. But beyond the practical considerations, Sam realized he was planning for something he hadn't dared to hope for in 3 years, a future filled with purpose, connection, and love. The Morrison Ranch, which had been dying slowly along with its lonely owner, was about to become something new and vital, a place where a fractured family could heal and a grieving widower could learn to live again. That evening, as Sam sat in his living room listening to Li Wei softly singing a Chinese lullaby to baby Hope while Li Mei practiced English by reading aloud from one of Margaret's books, he felt Margaret's presence more strongly than he had since her death. But instead of the crushing sadness that usually accompanied thoughts of his late wife, Sam felt something that could only be described as approval. Margaret would have loved this family, he realized. She would have fussed over baby Hope, taught Li Mei to bake cookies, and found ways to make Li Wei feel welcomed and valued. In opening his home to them, Sam wasn't betraying Margaret's memory. He was honoring it. 3 weeks later, the Morrison Ranch had transformed into something Sam barely recognized. The house that had been silent for 3 years now buzzed with activity from dawn to dusk. Li Mei's laughter echoed through the halls as she chased the barn cats. Baby Hope's cries marked the passage of time with their regular rhythm, and Li Wei's gentle humming filled the kitchen as she prepared meals that made the whole house smell like home. The changes went far beyond the obvious presence of his new family. Sam found himself waking earlier, not from loneliness, but from excitement about the day ahead. He had ordered a crib and changing table from the furniture store in Cedar Falls, and Li Mei had helped him paint her room a sunny yellow that made the morning light dance across the walls. The house felt alive in a way it never had, even during his happiest years with Margaret. Li Wei had proven to be an extraordinarily capable woman. Despite having given birth less than a month ago, she had insisted on contributing to the household from her first week of recovery. She had taken over the cooking entirely, preparing meals that were both delicious and unfamiliar to Sam's Montana ranch palate. Her beef and vegetable stir-fries had become his favorite dinner, and she had learned to make coffee exactly the way he liked it, strong enough to wake the dead, as he jokingly told her through Li Mei's translation. More surprising was Li Wei's aptitude for ranch work. Sam had started her with simple tasks, feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, helping with the garden that Margaret had abandoned to weeds. But Li Wei approached each new responsibility with determination and intelligence that impressed him daily. She learned quickly, asked thoughtful questions through Li Mei, and never complained about tasks that were far different from anything she had done in her previous life. Li Mei had blossomed in ways that broke Sam's heart with their beauty. The thin, frightened child who had knocked on his door was transforming into a confident young girl who approached each day with curiosity and joy. She had taken to ranch life as if she had been born to it, showing a natural affinity for animals that reminded Sam of himself at her age. Her relationship with Thunder had evolved into something magical to watch. The gentle horse seemed to understand that Li Mei was special, and He would whinny softly whenever he saw her approaching the barn. Sam had started giving her riding lessons on Thunder's broad, patient back, and Li Mei had shown remarkable balance and fearlessness for someone who had never been around horses. She has good hands. Joe Martinez, Sam's closest neighbor, had observed when he stopped by to meet the family that had everyone in Cedar Falls talking. That's something you can't teach. She feels what the horse is thinking. Joe's approval meant a great deal to Sam. The older Mexican rancher had been his mentor when Sam was first learning to manage the ranch after his father's death, and Joe's judgment about people was rarely wrong. The greatest transformation, however, was in baby Hope. At 3 weeks old, she had already grown noticeably, her tiny features becoming more distinct and her periods of alertness growing longer. Sam found himself utterly captivated by the infant, often volunteering to hold her while Li Wei worked or rested. There was something profound about holding new life in his hands. Hope would stare up at him with her dark, serious eyes, and Sam would find himself talking to her about the ranch, about the animals, about his dreams for what her life might become. He told her about Margaret, showing her the framed photographs throughout the house, and explaining what a good woman her honorary grandmother had been. She would have spoiled you terribly, Sam confided to Hope one evening as he fed her a bottle while Li Wei prepared dinner. She always said babies were God's way of reminding adults what pure love looked like. The practical challenges of integrating a family into his solitary life had been easier than Sam expected. Dr. Patterson had helped navigate the legal requirements for Li Wei's work authorization, and the school district had welcomed Li Mei with enthusiasm. Her English was already quite good, and her teachers reported that she was exceptionally bright and eager to learn. The financial aspects worked better than Sam had dared hope. Li Wei's help around the ranch allowed him to take on projects he had been putting off for years. The vegetable garden was producing more than it ever had, the chicken coop was better organized and more productive, and even simple tasks like laundry and meal planning were handled with an efficiency that freed Sam to focus on the heavy ranch work that really required his expertise. More importantly, having Li Wei's help meant Sam could expand some operations he had been considering. He had always wanted to raise sheep in addition to cattle, but the additional workload had seemed impossible for one person. With Li Wei learning to help with animal care, and Li Mei showing genuine interest in learning ranch management, Sam began to think about possibilities he hadn't considered in years. The community's response to his unusual new family had been mixed, but largely positive. Cedar Falls was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, and Sam's sudden acquisition of a Chinese woman, her daughter, and a newborn baby had provided months' worth of gossip material. Some of the response had been less than welcoming. Sam had overheard whispered comments at the feed store about Sam Morrison's Chinese family that carried undertones he didn't like. But for every narrow-minded comment, there had been 5 genuine expressions of interest and support. The ladies from Margaret's church had been particularly wonderful. Led by Mrs. Henderson, who had been Margaret's closest friend, they had organized a baby shower that overwhelmed Li Wei with its generosity. Car seats, strollers, clothes, diapers, toys. Hope had received enough gifts to last her through toddlerhood. More touching had been the way Mrs. Henderson and the other church ladies had worked to make Li Wei feel included despite the language barrier. They had organized English conversation groups that met twice a week, combining language practice with social support in a way that helped Li Wei begin building friendships in the community. Li Mei had integrated into school life with remarkable ease. Her teachers praised her quick learning and kind nature, and she had already made several close friends. Sam particularly enjoyed her stories about her classmates, delivered with the matter-of-fact observations that made children such entertaining storytellers. Jenny Martinez says I should join the 4-H club, Li Mei had announced over dinner one evening. They have projects with animals, and Jenny thinks I could do a project with chickens, or maybe sheep if we get some. Li Wei had looked questioning, and Li Mei had translated rapidly. Li Wei's response made both Li Mei and Sam laugh. Mama says she has never heard of 4-H, but if it involves learning about animals and responsibility, it sounds like something Chinese parents would approve of, Li Mei translated. It was moments like these that made Sam realize how naturally they had all adapted to life as a family. The cultural differences that he had worried might cause problems had instead brought richness and new perspectives to his previously narrow world. Li Wei's cooking had expanded his palate beyond recognition. Li Mei's questions about ranch life forced him to think about familiar tasks in new ways, and baby Hope's presence had reawakened a tenderness he thought had died with Margaret. But the most profound change was in Sam himself. The man who had spent 3 years avoiding human contact now looked forward to coming inside for lunch, so he could hear about Li Mei's morning lessons or watch Li Wei's latest attempt to communicate something complex in her improving but still limited English. He found himself planning family activities, trips to town, visits to neighbors, even a possible vacation to Yellowstone National Park the following summer. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. There were cultural misunderstandings, communication difficulties, and the simple adjustments required when people who are used to living alone suddenly find themselves sharing space. Li Wei was still sometimes too formal, too eager to prove her worth through constant work. Li Mei occasionally struggled with the isolation of ranch life after growing up in a city. And Sam sometimes caught himself falling back into his old patterns of emotional withdrawal when faced with the intensity of suddenly having people who depended on him. The most difficult moment had come during Li Mei's second week of school, when she had come home in tears because some older boys had made cruel comments about her being Chinese and living with a weird old rancher. Sam had felt a protective fury unlike anything he had experienced, even during Margaret's illness. He had driven to the school the next morning and requested a meeting with the principal, the teacher, and the parents of the boys involved. His quiet but firm explanation of what Li Mei meant to him and what he expected in terms of respect for his family had resolved the issue quickly. The boys had apologized, their parents had been mortified, and word had spread through the community that Sam Morrison considered Li Mei to be his daughter in every way that mattered. Family isn't just about blood. He had told Li Mei that evening as she practiced her English homework at the kitchen table while Li Wei nursed Hope nearby. Family is about the people who choose to love and protect each other. You're my family now, and I will always protect my family. Li Mei had looked up from her homework with tears in her eyes. Does that mean I can call you Papa Sam? She had asked. Not to replace my real papa, but because you take care of us like a papa does? Sam had found himself unable to speak for several moments, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. Finally, he had managed to say, I would be honored if you called me Papa Sam. The title had stuck, and hearing Li Mei call him Papa Sam had become one of Sam's greatest daily joys. Li Wei had begun calling him something in Mandarin that Li Mei translated as honorable uncle, which seemed to be her way of acknowledging his role in their family while maintaining the proper respect for her deceased husband. Now, as Sam sat on his porch watching Li Mei give Thunder his evening brushing while Li Wei hung laundry on the line with baby Hope secured in a carrier on her chest, he felt a contentment he hadn't known was possible. The ranch that had felt like a prison during his years of grief had become a sanctuary where healing and hope could grow. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that made the familiar landscape look magical. This was the time of day that had been hardest for Sam during his years alone. The quiet evening hours when loneliness hit hardest and memories of Margaret felt most acute. But now, instead of dreading the approaching night, Sam looked forward to the evening routine that had developed organically among his family. Soon they would all gather in the living room, where Li Wei would nurse Hope while Li Mei practiced reading aloud in English. And Sam would plan the next day's work while listening to the peaceful sounds of his household settling down for the night. Tonight would be special because Li Mei had announced that morning that she had written a story for her English class about coming to live on the ranch. She wanted to read it aloud to her family after dinner, and Sam found himself eager to hear how she had chosen to tell their story. As he watched his family completing their evening chores, Sam Morrison realized that the lonely widower who had answered his door that night 3 weeks ago no longer existed. In his place was a man who woke up each morning with purpose, who had people depending on him and people he could depend on in return. He was Papa Sam now, and that title had given him an identity he valued more than any he had ever held. The ranch that had been dying along with its isolated owner had become a place where new life was not just born but nurtured and celebrated. And Sam knew, with the certainty that comes from witnessing miracles, that Margaret would have been proud of the family they had all become together. 6 months after that snowy November night, when destiny knocked on his door, Sam Morrison stood in his kitchen watching Li Wei prepare dumplings for their Chinese New Year celebration. Her movements were graceful and efficient as she rolled paper-thin dough and filled each pocket with seasoned pork and vegetables. Li Mei sat beside her mother at the kitchen table, her smaller hands trying to copy the intricate folding technique that Li Wei made look effortless. The shape is important, Li Wei explained in the careful English that had improved dramatically over the months. Each fold must be perfect, or the dumpling will open when cooking and lose all the good things inside. Baby Hope, now 6 months old and sitting confidently in her high chair, watched the dumpling-making process with fascination while chewing on a teething ring. She had grown into a chubby, cheerful baby whose smile could light up the darkest Montana winter day. Her personality was already emerging. She was curious like her sister, determined like her mother, and had developed a special attachment to Sam that made his heart swell with pride every time she reached for him with her chubby arms. Sam marveled at how completely their lives had intertwined. What had begun as emergency assistance had evolved into something that felt as natural and necessary as breathing. The legal paperwork had been completed months ago. Li Wei now had permanent work authorization. Li Mei was officially enrolled in school, and Baby Hope had all the documentation she needed as an American citizen born on the Morrison Ranch. But the legal documents were just formalities. The real bonds had been forged through shared daily life, mutual support during difficult times, and the gradual building of trust and love that had transformed 4 separate people into a family. The ranch had prospered beyond Sam's wildest expectations. Li Wei's work ethic was legendary. She rose before dawn to help with morning chores, managed the household with efficiency that amazed Sam, and had taken over the financial record-keeping with a precision that had improved their profit margins significantly. Her suggestions for improving various ranch operations had proven invaluable, bringing a fresh perspective to problems Sam had simply accepted as unchangeable. Li Mei had become his apprentice in every sense of the word. At 13, she could handle basic veterinary care for the animals, manage the feeding schedules for different livestock, and ride thunder with a skill that impressed even experienced ranch hands. More importantly, she had proven to have the instincts and temperament of a natural rancher. She noticed when animals were sick before symptoms became obvious. She understood the rhythms of seasons and weather, and she approached ranch work with the kind of passion that couldn't be taught. Her academic performance had been equally impressive. Li Mei consistently earned the highest grades in her class, and her teachers frequently commented on her maturity and leadership abilities. She had joined 4-H as planned and had won several awards for her sheep project. Sam had purchased a small flock specifically for her to manage, and her careful attention to breeding, nutrition, and health management had produced animals that were the envy of experienced ranchers. The community's acceptance of their unusual family had grown stronger over time. Sam's quiet dignity and the obvious love between family members had gradually won over even the most skeptical residents of Cedar Falls. Li Wei's gentle nature and tireless work ethic had earned respect from the ranch wives who initially viewed her with suspicion, and Li Mei's academic achievements and polite behavior had made her a favorite among teachers and parents throughout the school district. The church ladies, led by Mrs. Henderson, had essentially adopted Li Wei as one of their own. They met twice weekly for English conversation practice that had evolved into genuine friendship and mutual support. Li Wei had begun teaching some of the ladies basic Chinese cooking techniques, and their cultural exchange had enriched everyone involved. Baby Hope had become the unofficial mascot of Cedar Falls. Everywhere the family went, people stopped to admire the happy, healthy baby who had been born in Sam Morrison's guest room. Dr. Patterson frequently used Hope as an example of successful emergency delivery when training local EMTs, and he never tired of telling people about Sam's calm competence during the dramatic midnight birth. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation had been in Sam himself. The isolated, grieving widower had become a man who looked forward to each new day with anticipation and joy. He had gained weight, his color had improved, and the deep lines of sadness around his eyes had been replaced by laugh lines earned through countless moments of happiness with his family. Sam had also discovered that he enjoyed being a father figure. Teaching Li Mei about ranching, helping her with homework, attending her school programs, and watching her grow into a confident young woman had awakened paternal instincts he never knew he possessed. His protective feelings toward all 3 of his family members surprised him with their intensity. He would have fought anyone or anything that threatened their well-being. The financial benefits of their partnership had exceeded everyone's expectations. The ranch was more profitable than it had been in decades, thanks to Li Wei's management skills and Li Mei's contributions to daily operations. Sam had been able to expand his cattle operation, add the sheep flock, and even begin raising heritage chickens that commanded premium prices from restaurants and Billings. More importantly, they had been able to save money toward Li Wei's dream of opening a small restaurant in Cedar Falls. She had been developing recipes that combined Chinese techniques with local Montana ingredients, creating unique dishes that had become legendary among the friends who had been lucky enough to taste them. The plan was to start small, maybe a food truck at farmers markets, and gradually build toward a restaurant that could serve both the local community and tourists passing through on their way to Yellowstone. Li Mei had her own plans developing. At 13, she was already talking about studying agricultural science in college, so she could return to help manage and modernize the ranch. She had ideas about sustainable farming practices, organic certification, and agritourism that excited Sam with their possibilities. More than once, he had caught himself imagining Li Mei as a grown woman running the Morrison Ranch with the same passion and intelligence she brought to everything else. The celebration they were preparing for today represented more than just Chinese New Year. It had become their family's annual celebration of a night they all found each other. Sam had declared it a ranch holiday, giving Li Wei and Li Mei the day off from chores so they could focus on preparing the elaborate meal that would mark their family's founding. Friends and neighbors would join them this evening. Mrs. Henderson and several church ladies, Dr. Patterson and his wife, Joe Martinez, and his family, and even Li Mei's closest school friends. What had started as a cultural celebration for Li Wei and Li Mei had become a community event that brought together people who might otherwise never have shared a meal. "Papa Sam," Li Mei said, interrupting his thoughts, "Mama wants to know if you remember what you were doing exactly 6 months ago tonight." Sam smiled at the question he had been anticipating. "I was sitting in my chair by the fire, thinking about going to bed early because I was tired and lonely. I had no idea that my life was about to change completely." Li Wei spoke rapidly to Li Mei, who translated with a grin. "Mama says she was in the back of the truck, scared and cold, praying to her ancestors to send help. She says she prayed for a miracle, but she never imagined the miracle would be so much bigger than just help with the baby." "Tell your mother that I was praying for something too," Sam said softly. "I had been asking Margaret to help me figure out how to live again. I think she sent you to me." As Li Mei translated, Li Wei's eyes filled with tears. She spoke at length, gesturing toward baby Hope, and then toward the windows that looked out over the thriving ranch. "Mama says she believes that people who love us never really leave," Li Mei translated. "She thinks you're Margaret, and my papa arranged for us to find each other because they knew we could heal each other's hearts." The conversation was interrupted by baby Hope dropping her teething ring and babbling loudly for attention. Sam immediately moved to pick her up, settling her on his lap where she could continue watching the dumpling preparation while playing with his shirt buttons. "What do you think, Hope?" Sam asked the baby. "Do you think the people who love us help arrange miracles?" Hope responded by grabbing his nose and laughing, a sound that never failed to make all three adults smile. At 6 months old, Hope was already showing signs of the intelligence that ran in her family. She was curious about everything, quick to learn new skills, and seemed to understand far more than babies her age typically did. "She's going to be trouble when she gets older," Li Mei observed, watching her baby sister with fond exasperation. "She already knows how to get whatever she wants just by smiling." "That's what baby sisters are for," Sam replied, remembering his own sister who had been born when he was 12. "They teach their big sisters how to be patient and protective." Li Wei finished the last dumpling and began preparing the steamer. The kitchen smelled wonderful, a combination of ginger, garlic, sesame oil, and other spices that had become familiar and comforting to Sam over the months. Li Wei's cooking had introduced him to flavors he never knew existed, and he had discovered a love for Chinese cuisine that surprised him. As the afternoon progressed, the house filled with the sounds and smells of preparation. Li Mei set the large dining room table with Margaret's best china, carefully arranging red decorations that Li Wei had made from paper and fabric. Li Wei prepared additional dishes, sweet and sour pork, fried rice with vegetables from their garden, and a whole steamed fish that represented abundance and prosperity in the new year. Sam's contributions were more modest but heartfelt. He had learned to make Li Wei's favorite tea properly, and he had prepared a special dessert, apple pie made with apples from the tree Margaret had planted years ago. The combination of Chinese delicacies and American comfort food had become their family's signature style. As evening approached, and their guests began arriving, Sam found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The man who had been slowly dying of loneliness had been reborn through the love and trust of three people who had needed him as much as he had needed them. Mrs. Henderson arrived first, carrying a bouquet of winter flowers from her greenhouse, and a wrapped present that she handed to Lee May with a conspiratorial wink. Dr. Patterson and his wife brought homemade bread and genuine curiosity about Chinese New Year traditions. Joe Martinez's family came laden with Mexican dishes that would create an international buffet reflecting the diverse community that Cedar Falls had become. Lee May's school friends arrived in a giggling group, excited to participate in what had become known throughout the school district as the most interesting cultural celebration of the year. Their presence brought youthful energy that made the house feel even more alive and joyful. As they all gathered around the dining room table, adults and children, longtime friends and new acquaintances, people from different cultures united by their shared affection for the Morrison family, Sam felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the richness that had entered his life. Li Wei stood to offer a toast, her English now confident enough for her to address the group without Li May's translation. 6 months ago, my family had nothing except hope. Tonight, we have everything because we have love and friendship and community. Thank you all for welcoming us and helping us build a new life. Li Mei added her own toast to Papa Sam, who opened his door at midnight and opened his heart to strangers. And to everyone here who showed us that home isn't a place, it's the people who choose to love you. Sam raised his glass, looking around the table at faces that had become dear to him. To family, he said simply. The family we're born into and the family we choose. And to second chances, because sometimes life gives us exactly what we need exactly when we need it most. As glasses clinked around the table and conversation resumed, baby Hope began fussing in her high chair. Sam automatically reached for her, settling her on his lap where she could see everyone and be part of the celebration. She looked around the table with serious dark eyes, as if she understood that this gathering was important. Tell me, Hope, Sam whispered to the baby, what do you think your first year is going to bring? Hope responded by grabbing his beard and babbling something that sounded remarkably like Papa, sending ripples of laughter around the table. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the dishes were washed, the family gathered in the living room for their traditional end-of-day ritual. Li Wei nursed Hope in the rocking chair, while Li Mei practiced reading aloud from a book about ranching techniques. Sam sat in his chair by the fire, planning the next day's work and listening to the peaceful sounds of his family settling down for the night. But tonight was different because it marked the official end of their first 6 months as a family and the beginning of whatever came next. As Sam looked around the room, at Li Wei humming softly to Hope, at Li Mei concentrating seriously on her reading, at the family photographs that now included pictures of all four of them together, he realized that his capacity for happiness had expanded beyond anything he thought possible. The ranch house that had been a monument to loneliness had become a home filled with laughter, purpose, and love. The Morrison Ranch, which had been dying slowly along with its solitary owner, had been reborn as a place where dreams could grow and flourish. And Sam Morrison, who had spent 3 years believing that his story was ending, had discovered that it was actually just beginning. The knock at midnight that had seemed like an interruption to his quiet evening had actually been the arrival of his future, a future he never could have imagined but couldn't now picture living without. As the fire burned low and his family prepared for bed, Sam Morrison said a silent prayer of gratitude to Margaret, to Li Wei's deceased husband, and to whatever forces in the universe had conspired to bring them all together. They had all lost so much, but in finding each other, they had gained something infinitely precious, proof that love multiplies when it's shared, and that the best families are sometimes the ones we choose rather than the ones we're born into. Outside, snow began to fall softly across the Montana plains, just as it had 6 months ago. But inside the Morrison Ranch house, every lamp was lit against the darkness, welcoming whatever miracles tomorrow might bring.